Now, the first great part about the software is I can push the Windows key and I can just type cock. And there it is, Moza Cockpit software. Today, we're going to be looking at the new AB9 Force Feedback base from Moza. In full disclosure, the AB9 was sent to me for free from Moza, so that in return I would provide testing and feedback along with a review. However, the opinions found in this video are 100% my own. Hey everyone, future video editing jabbers here, and I just want to take a quick second to say that this is by far the longest review I've ever done. And I felt like force feedback being as new as it is, there's just a lot to cover. So I'll do my best to add chapters and everything to the video so you can find everything you need easier. And I'll likely do a follow-up video about the software as the software matures, because as you'll see in this video, the software really isn't ready for even a review, yet alone a release. But I go on about that later on in the video. Hopefully you guys sit and watch it and listen to what I have to say about it, because it's very interesting, and I think we're in a really interesting space with force feedback and what's to come. So anyway, thanks for watching. Let's get back to the video. All right, so we're taking a look at the Moza base. I have a whole plethora of stuff out on the table here. I've been testing just about every grip I can think of that I own. Mounting solutions. We're doing some thermals, some thermal testing. We've done some testing for Newton meters, which is basically the strength. But the device itself is very sturdy. It's an all aluminum alloy design. The entire outer casing is all aluminum. This sucker weighs in at about 11 pounds. You can see here there's this leather dust cover, which is nice. Definitely doesn't feel cheap, which I can appreciate. And on the back, we have some connections here. We have the USB connection, we have power connection, and then there's these kind of look like RJ. They're not RJ45. I forget what this format is, but there's 4 connections for 4 other devices, and I'm assuming that Moza is planning on having their throttle and rudder pedals at the very least connect to here. Maybe the openings are for some other devices as well, which would be nice because then everything runs through one USB and you don't have 4 cables going to your USB hub or the back of your PC. There's various mounting solutions on the bottom of this. They have quite a few different layouts as far as mounting holes go. I have this plate here, which was used originally when I had the Virpil Warbird base, and the holes do line up on here. I think these holes here, there's 4 holes, so that layout works. The other alternative is this sucker here. This is a Monster Tech mount, and on here I have the Thrustmaster Warthog mount, and that does line up on here, I think on these 4 holes here. So it's kind of nice that, you know, the compatibility with bases that you already have and mounting solutions you already have, they kind of accounted for that. The other thing that they have is their own mounting bracket. So they have their own mounting solution. It's very small. I am not a fan. It keeps you really close to the desk. You can't really center mount it. It doesn't get low enough. The device can't get low enough to kind of center mount it. You're going to have to use it as a side stick, which not everybody likes. But the great thing about it is it does work with their device, and it does mount to the front of the device. You can see here there's these 2 slides, and the mounting solution takes advantage. Very similar to how Monster Tech works with the 80/20 bar. To put this on, I had to turn this around, but you would simply just slide it on in, position it where you want, and that's all there is to it. And just go ahead and tighten up these 2 screws. You stick it on the table, but I mean, even as you can see here, if you have a stick, the stick is going to stick out to about here, and you know, you're not really going to be center mounting this. If you have an extension, it's even worse. So this mount's cool, and I think it works for some scenarios, but I don't think it's going to be the ideal solution for most of you purchasing this, especially because most of you are probably going to want to mount it as a center stick. I think it makes sense to be a center mounted force feedback stick anyway, because that's kind of how most, if not all of the aircraft would be that you would expect force feedback from. So here we have the connector. This is kind of the standard connector you would find on a Thrustmaster or a Virpil base, and also similar to WinWing, but we'll go over that in a second. Any Virpil device that I have works on here with some limitations, and I'll talk about that in a second. But Thrustmaster works, all the buttons work, all the hats work. You can see here I have the Thrustmaster Warthog grip. Put that in there, tighten everything up, and boom, there you have it. The downside to this style is that you cannot turn it. You cannot angle this. Typically, you would turn it counterclockwise for your right hand. Turn it counterclockwise up to about 15 degrees total. You can't do that without maybe unscrewing this connector down here. If you were to unscrew these two screws, you might have to clip off the metal bracket there as well. And then you could probably pull this out to some length maybe to push in the connector you're trying to attach. And then you might be able to turn it 15 degrees or whatever and lock it. The downside to that is you're probably then voiding the warranty. So you would probably have to use an adapter. I know Thrustmaster is coming out with an adapter that's supposed to work on their AVA base. I'm sure that you could 3D print something that would work. The alternative is if you have an extension, most of the extensions have a cable that pulls out, like this one here. This is from Virpil, and you can then plug it in where it needs to go. This thing's always such a pain in the ass. Now it appears that my pins on this are okay. Let's try this again. The pins in here for me got a little bit bent, so I had to fix that. But basically, this is the worst thing about this connector. I really dislike it for that reason. They look all right. Compare it to this. Yeah, they look right. Maybe if we just shove it in there. I don't like this connector. I wish people would move away from this connector, but everybody's using it now. So it's easy once you put it together and it's working. If you're swapping stuff like I typically do for reviews like this connector sucks. Simply attach it. And then the nice thing about this is if you do need that 15-degree rotation, you loosen it, turn it, tighten it, and now you have that rotation on that extension. And any extension typically has a loose wire, so you can probably do that. Now, let's talk about the internals on this thing. Okay, so we got the screws out, and this simply just pops up. And there you go. So the internals for this, the milling work looks amazing. It looks fairly simple design. There's no cam necessary because everything's on these pulleys. There's a motor here, and it might be hard to see, but there is a motor all the way down at the bottom, which controls this axis here. This motor controls your pitch, and that bottom one controls the roll axis. Like I said before, the milling work is great. The motors themselves, I'm assuming they made these custom fittings for them, because I can't see anything for the motor. I don't know what kind of motor it is. I'm hesitant at this point in time while I'm trying to do this review to tear everything apart, because I'm in the process of giving them feedback. I don't want to break something and then not be able to give them feedback on the software. So unfortunately, I wanted to tear this whole thing apart and see. I would like to see what the brand is of the motors. I know that's a question everybody's been asking, and Moza won't answer for whatever reason. There's two things I want to point out, but in reality, they're both the same. But something I noticed when I opened this up initially was on the front axis. This might be hard to see. there is they look like burn marks. I don't think they're burn marks, but they're from this pulley down here. This is, again, the pulley for the roll access. And what I found was that when this is sealed up correctly and the dust cover's down there, you can actually feel that pulley. Let me turn it here. In fact, this is probably the best way to put it. If I pull back on the device, so this is as if I'm adding some pitch, the pulley is visible through the leather here. And if I were to go back and forth like this, that pulley is effectively rubbing on the inside of the leather. And I would imagine over time that could cause a problem. I think it will take a very long time because the pulley isn't something that's spinning. It's literally pulling where it needs to be and holding and maintaining. So it doesn't move a whole lot, but it does move enough that it ended up causing some black marks. It ended up causing some black marks on the bottom, which is not ideal, but I don't think it's kind of one of those. It doesn't seem to be deteriorating. I can't feel any discernible problem here, I guess. Maybe a little bit here, but I've also been kind of messing with it a bunch. So just something to be aware of. I told Moza about this like probably a week into having this. I pointed it out. It's also, remember I said there were two. If I turn it, you can kind of see the same problem right here. I told Moza about this initially. It was probably about a week in. I opened it up and found it right off the bat. They said they were aware of it, and they weren't concerned. They don't think it's going to be a problem, but something to keep in mind. So one of the other things that I wanted to do, the claims that this device is a 9 Newton meter amount of force with a 12 peak. And so the 12 peak, if you're not aware, is a little misleading. I believe what they mean by that, and in fact, I'll show you why I kind of prove that that's what they mean. The peak would be on both axes. So if I pushed on roll and pitch at the same time, the total amount of force fed back to me via the spring, or the quote-unquote spring that is being simulated by the force, would be 12 Newton meters. Now, if we talk about like what is a Newton meter, well, a Newton meter is the torque result from force of 1 Newton applied perpendicularly to the end of the moment arm that is 1 meter long. Yes, I read that off the screen. But the idea is it's a way to gauge how much force is being applied. And there's a way to test this. Turns out you can take a standard luggage weight. Okay. What I've done is I've already pre-configured the software so that the force of the spring is 100%. And then what I'll do is I can take this weight or scale. I guess it's a scale, not a weight. This is very clumsy to do while I'm recording. So if this doesn't work, you're going to have to take my word for it, I guess. But as I pull, let me get my hand around the camera. The extent of where I pull comes to about 8.5. The problem is that when it encounters a spot where the weight hasn't changed, it freezes. And so if I don't get it to the limit before it freezes, I kind of have a bad reading. So let's try again. It's about, well, this is reading 9.7 now. It's 9.3. In my testing, it's around 9. So sometimes it would be 8.5. It's really hard to gauge where the end is, and then you're not pulling against the physical limit. So what we can do is we can go ahead and apply the amount of pounds force. And so let's just put in 9. We'll go ahead and this is an estimation. It's not really going to matter if we're off by a little bit. The idea is we should be very close to 9 Newton meters in the end. So we'll go ahead and put 9 in. The length. Now, this is why I left it open. The center of the gimbal is where we want to measure to, all the way up the shaft, giggity, to the point where we had the scale attached, which was right here. We go from there all the way up. It's about 10 inches. So if we come back over to our calculator and we put 10 inches in, we'll see that this is going to be 10 Newton in meters. Okay. Now, this is all rough math because I can't get the exact numbers. This might be more like 9.5 and this might have been the original 8.7. But the point is, it's 9 to 10 is what we're gauging as far as the calculated torque goes, which is what they are claiming. Now, what you can do is you can actually calculate from a singular axis what the peak Newton meters would be with an equation. And so what's that equation? The square root of a to the power 2 plus b to the power of 2. That will give us the resulting max or peak Newton meters. And so in A, we'll put 9, and in B, we'll put 9. In reality, we can use these numbers if we want, 9.33. We just throw that in there, let Google do the math, and there you have it. You have 13. That's probably because of some rounding here. I think if we put in 9 exactly, it'll be 12. But the point is, that's more than likely what they are claiming to be their peak. So in trying to understand how force feedback works these days, and it's been 20 years or some crazy number of years since we've had force feedback in the flight sim market. I'm not super privy on how it all works, so I've been talking to a lot of people who have the Rhino force feedback base from VPForce. I've been talking to the developer or creator of that base as well. I've been reaching out to everybody I can, people who have old Sidewinder things. I talked to Redkite. Redkite gave me a bunch of information. Thank you, Redkite. Another guy was D-Drake from the HOTUS subreddit or the Discord. He runs that, and he has a lot of this gear. He's very, very knowledgeable about a lot of this stuff, so I've been picking his brain. And one of the things that everybody keeps saying is, how does this device cool itself from overuse? Because what happens is, when the motors start to get too hot, they will then have less force applied so they can cool down. So they're supposed to not overheat, and to do that, they kind of throttle themselves back, so to speak. And then ultimately, if it gets too hot, it will just turn off and not work at all. And so you can literally lose force feedback in an axis or both axes combined, depending on what you're doing and for how long. So my thought was, I'll try to mess with it and see how hot it gets. So for the very first one, I guess the baseline on the pitch axis is roughly about 78 degrees. And so we can keep that there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to probably push it forward and hold it, and then we'll see how hot it gets. And I'll probably give it a minute or two just to see if I lose any force if it feels any different to me. And then we'll measure the heat again and see what it's at. So here we go. I think it's been about a minute. I don't know why you would hold this for this long. In reality, you would have probably given it a break. I guess if you're dogfighting, probably pull the other way, but you'd be trying to maintain a certain cornering speed, maybe. I don't know. But if you're in a dogfight for this long and you haven't made any gains to shoot the guy down, or he hasn't shot you down, you're in a stalemate, you probably need to get out of that and do something else, because this is ridiculous. So, okay, it's probably been about a minute and a half, I would guess. I'm going to go ahead and let go. You can imagine this is probably enclosed and probably has a little less cooling because of it. But yeah, I mean, that thing got up to 82? That's not terrible at all. So maybe that aluminum design helps dissipate the heat. I don't know. Again, I don't know what kind of motor's in here either. So I would imagine it would get hot. I know the Rhino, I think people are putting fans on it because they're having heating issues over time. Again, the temperature of the room's going to help. In here, it's about 74 degrees. That's in freedom unit. I'm gonna go ahead and hold this again here and see what happens. I mean, it's climbing. We're up to 85 now. There's 89. It's very hot over here on this side. Yeah, I'll just hold it for a little longer here. 99 right there. We'll just keep going for a little bit. But I mean, like, I've been messing with this for how long? It's not any weaker. It feels the same to me. So yeah, it's still reading about 85 degrees. Oh, there was 107 for a second, 109. So it'll get up there. There's your 109. But again, like that took a full 2.5, maybe 3 minutes at most. I think it's safe to say that it's not going to require any cooling, and if it does, you're probably using it wrong. I don't know. Okay, let's talk about grip compatibility. I already kind of went over how the Warthog grips work great. The other one that works just as good without issue is the F-18 grip from Thrustmaster. All of the buttons work. There are no issues there. But let's talk about Virpil. I have a Virpil VFX grip here, and this is the F-14 style grip. And everything works here except this is not an axis. This lever acts as a button only. All of the other buttons work. The two-stage trigger works just fine. The button on the side here works. But this is the DLC axis, and typically with a Virpil base, this is an actual axis. But just like sticking the Virpil devices on a Thrustmaster base, this becomes a button. So you have to go all the way out, hit the end of the extent of the axis, that activates a button, and then the same when you go backwards. So that's kind of the same thing with this brake lever. That is also a button press, not an axis. The only other stick that I have from Virpil that I've been able to test with is the CM2. Now, the CM2 has very similar issues. The brake lever is a button. It is not an axis anymore. Everything else appears to work except for this hat here. It's a 4-way plus depress. The depress doesn't work. Sorry for the interruption again. This is Editor Jabbers one more time. And I realized in watching this back that the one thing that I did miss is that the thumb axis on the stick also doesn't technically work as an axis. It actually works as an 8-way hat. So keep that in mind. If you're okay losing one button on this hat here, and you're okay with this being a brake button instead of a axis, you'll be totally fine. Yeah, and the other great thing is that, you know, the Virpil stuff has the cable that comes out, and it's not mounted here permanently, so you can actually attach it and then turn the grip your 15 degrees or 5 degrees, whatever you like, if you're center mounting it without issue. So that's a great thing about the Virpil stuff. The next thing I tested, I have this F-18 WinWing grip. It has the same connector. It's 6 pins instead of 5, I believe. The Thrustmaster and Virpil is a different pin loadout. They have 5 pins. This does accept 6 pins. However, plugging this in does nothing. It doesn't recognize the grip at all in the software like it does the Thrustmaster and Virpil grips. So I don't know if there's something Moza is going to do to try to get this to work, but as of right now and the making of this video, the WinWing grips do not work at all. The other problem is there is no locking nut on the base of the WinWing grips. On the WinWing bases, I have one here. The locking nut is on the bottom of the base, not on the grip like it is with Virpil and Thrustmaster. So it's kind of a backwards design, and for that reason, you can't connect them. There is a company called VPForce that makes the Rhino force feedback device, and they do sell an adapter, which I did purchase to see if it would work. The adapter plugs into here, and then you would plug this into here. Plug the grip into the top of the adapter, and then that gives you that locking nut on both ends. It still didn't work. So I think that on the inside of here, they use a shift register for that 6th pin. But again, it's not recognized at all by the Moza software. So not much we can do there. The other device I did try is I have a RealSimulator force sensing base with their grip. It does use the same locking nut as Thrustmaster or Virpil. It does have the same pin loadout, and a Thrustmaster grip will work on this force sensing base, but this grip does not get recognized by the Moza software. So if you're planning on using the RealSimulator grip on the Moza software, it won't work. Okay, the last grip I have is the VKB Gunfighter. This one's a little bit different. On the inside here, obviously it doesn't have the same connector. I can't just screw it in. On the inside here, it has a 3-pin connection. And if we look at the connector here, you can see these are where the 3 pins touch and send the signal all the way down to what they have is called a black box. Black box looks like this. And this is what feeds into your computer. And this is what you can send like firmware updates and stuff to. This has the configuration for your device. So what I did was I went on VPForce's website. VPForce has another adapter, same place I bought the WinWing one from. They have another adapter for the VKB. And so what happens is this just connects to mount the VKB, but it doesn't send any signal through from the grip down to the base. And so you put this on how you want it. You can attach the grip from there and you're good to go. Now, then what happens is this wire that comes off of the adapter plugs directly into your black box. And then the black box goes to your USB into your computer. And so you have 2 USBs. You have one USB for the Moza base, and then you have another USB for the grip itself. And that works flawlessly because the grip is not really communicating through Moza. It's going directly to the black box from the adapter. The adapter just mounts it to the device. So if you have a VKB grip, you should have no problem at all as long as you have an adapter of sorts. I think Moza said they were going to make an adapter, but I haven't seen anything. So keep an eye out or just go buy one from a third party. This thing feels pretty solid, and I'd be happy to use it if I were using the VKB grip. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about the Moza software. This is where everything gets a little bit, like the hardware itself seems really solid. The software is where everything starts to fall apart a bit. Now, I say that with some hesitation. This isn't released yet. Nobody has it but the reviewers and people who are giving feedback. And the whole point of that was to help them flush out some of this stuff that I'm going to talk about. So I want to preface all of this with what you are about to see with the software. I have already gotten multiple updates, and it's changed every time. And so this may not be what you get when you get the device. Just keep that in mind. Now, the first great part about the software is I can push the Windows key and I can just type cock. And there it is, Moza Cockpit software. And when we start that up, this is what you get here. You can see here they have device information for their grip, for their pedals, their throttle, and then the AB9 base itself. On the right-hand side, and again, when I first got the software, everything was in English. And as I've gotten iterations of it, after, reporting this problem and that problem, they haven't kept up with the translations. And so there's a lot of stuff in Chinese right now, which is a little bit frustrating for me because I don't speak Chinese and I can't read Chinese. So some of the settings, I'm having a hard time trying to figure out what they do. I'll kind of show that to you and go over it, but that's why you see Chinese here. These are the games that it says it supports. Now, obviously there's DCS. This is Microsoft Flight Simulator Steam Edition. No one uses this anymore. One of the claims on their website is that there is compatibility with top simulation games. And if we go down to that area, it says DCS, it says X-Plane War Thunder IL-2 1946, unexpected, and then Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, essentially. It says 2020 here. But it's not listed here, okay? So there's a bit of a mismatch. Now, some of that is that there are two types of force feedback. And let me kind of explain that by showing you this settings page. There's direct input, and what that is the game itself is using DirectX APIs called Direct Input to send force feedback information based on what the game is calculating for force feedback. Okay? Now, when we look at this list over here, War Thunder supports that. IL-2 1946 supports that. DCS supports that for some modules. X-Plane 12, I don't have. I can't speak to it. My understanding is that it does have some, but I can't really talk to that point. But Flight Simulator doesn't at all. So what do you do? Well, then there's Telemetry Force Feedback, this one here. Telemetry Force Feedback is they've installed something like a script or a plugin to see what's going on in the game and then send that information to the Moza software, which then interprets it and provides its own force feedback information. And so if we look at the Telemetry FFB page here, force feedback, this, I used Google Translate. This one is like general settings. This one's planes with props. This is jets. And the last one here is helicopters. And so these are all different settings that you can tune for each of those. And again, I don't know what half this stuff is because I can't read Chinese. And Google Translate has a bit of an issue with some of this. I think the font's too small. Even when I zoom in, it doesn't always capture it. So I kind of gave up on this and I'm just waiting for them to translate it for me so I can actually read it and understand it a bit better. So software is kind of in a bad spot to really do a full review on the software itself because it's currently in flux and whatnot. So anyway, back to my point. There is currently no telemetry for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 that I can find. I couldn't get it working. So this claim that it works for this, I don't know how they're doing it. I haven't been able to get it to work. So keep that in mind. If Microsoft Flight Simulator is your main flight simulator, I don't know that you're going to get anything from this. I haven't been able to do it. And I've had this thing for a month and I've had multiple software updates and I can't get anything working force feedback wise in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So just keep that in mind. But my main, it would be DCS. And so let's talk about DCS. So DCS supports direct input, and what direct input is again, the game telling the force feedback device what to do. And so an example of that would be when you have a helicopter and you push the trim button, the spring should go limp in the device and you should be able to move it where you want. When you let go, it should the new center should be that center. And I have this video from Red Kite that he gave me to demonstrate this on a Sidewinder, and the reason I'm doing that is it doesn't 100% work at all with the Moza device yet. So at the time of this review, which is the 29th of July, this thing goes out to the public. I mean, I was assuming that they would start shipping August 1st because the pre-order was through the end of July, was it? I think the assumption was that it was the end of July, beginning of August, because when you click the pre-order button, it said 4 to 6 weeks, and they started this in June. I don't see anything on here that says when it ships, and I don't think anybody knows when it ships. And so I think a lot of what the holdup is right now, in my opinion, is this software needs to work, and it doesn't currently work fully. But remember what I said, it is getting better. I am getting updates here and there, and with each update, it's getting better, and I provide feedback and say, hey, this is what you still have wrong. The problem right now with the direct input, especially with helicopters, is the spring. It's almost like the setting in this software, this setting right here, this spring setting, this overrides everything in the game. So if the game says, hey, no spring because you've pushed the trim button and you're going to move it and we don't want to feel the spring, this setting's overriding that. And so it's a little bit frustrating. The last thing on here that I'm just going to point out real quick is the integrated force feedback. That means it's this one, telemetry force feedback, and direct input. This is probably what you're going to want to use most of the time, because why flip between these? If it has both, great, and if they enhance each other, awesome. For games that just have direct input, if you have it set to telemetry, you will not feel anything. So flipping to integrated seems like the best way to use it all the time, but we'll see as we get more software updates. So I do want to talk about the telemetry force feedback stuff for a second. I think that the thing that Moza is going to have a problem with, at least for a little while, is everyone's going to compare it to the VPForce Rhino. Okay, I don't have a VPForce Rhino. I have some friends that do, and I've talked to them, and they've given me demonstrations of what it does, just so I know what is possible. And this is the VPForce software here on the left. Just make sure that's visible to you guys. And you can see here it supports DCS, IL2, Microsoft Flight Simulator, and X-Plane. And it does that through telemetry. And the amazing thing about this is that it has settings for everything. So if we open up the settings manager, what you can see here is that you can pick the simulator. So DCS, IL2, Microsoft Flight Simulator, and X-Plane. And then you can pick the class of aircraft. And so you have prop, you have jet, and you have helicopter. Very similar to what we have over here, right? Like I said before, this is kind of the global settings. This is prop, this is jet, and all the way over here is helicopter. So Moza has got that classification down, okay? And so the difference is that the VPForce allows you to go down into the module itself. And so I can go edit let's say the Spitfire, and I can change all of these settings one by one. And you can save these, you can share them with your friends. I think this is essential. When you look at like force feedback from a racing sim level, this kind of isn't really all that necessary. You know, the simplicity of cars, and I'm sure I'm ignorant in this, but like the simplicity, at least in my head, is if I have a car, the wheels are on the ground, the force feedback in the steering wheel doesn't really change the feeling of the car. It's just it is what it is. You're driving, and the wheels themselves are going to try to move the steering wheel back to center based on your speed and how much you've turned the wheel. In a plane, it's totally different. An example of that would be a World War II plane. In a World War II plane, you have something called elevator droop. Elevator droop is when, because there's no airflow over the elevator in the back of the plane, the weight of the elevator is going to fall. And what's that going to do? It's going to push your stick forward. And you can see here, there is an elevator droop setting, right? Now, that's not going to be in every single prop plane, right? So having a very granular level, not a very fine grain, but a very coarse grain level of setting doesn't really cover all the scenarios that we as flight simmers are going to want. So I think Moza has some work to do here, in my opinion, if they want to compete at the level. A lot of people think VPForce is, at the top as far as force feedback goes. And I know there's not a lot out there, so it's kind of easy to be at the top. But more are going to be coming. We have a WinWing force feedback device coming. Virpil's going to get into the market, I think. And so you're going to have more people, and each one is going to need to try to outclass the other. And how are they going to do that? They're going to do it with telemetry force feedback. And it needs to work per plane, per module. But the downside of that is you have to know at least someone who can give you some information on what it should feel like, or have a way for the community to do it. And I think that that's what VPForce has done really well, is a lot of this stuff is community driven. A lot of the updates coming into these specific telemetry force feedback profiles is that they are kind of run by the community over there. I've looked at their Discord, and a lot of really smart people figuring this stuff out. And I think that if Moza wants to compete in this world, it's going to have to get to that level. Otherwise, they're kind of going to be a mid-grade company. And I think given the hardware itself, it doesn't feel like they're trying to be a mid-grade company. So the software has a ways to go. I think everybody needs to realize that it's going to take time. There is a lot. I mean, look at how many different profiles are already in this bad boy here. You have DCS, you have IL-2, right? You have jet aircraft, you have propeller aircraft, you have all of these. These all have slightly different settings from one another. And then on top of that, you have all the different things in Microsoft Flight Simulator. You have turboprops. There's just going to be so much stuff that they have to play catch up on, and it's going to take time. So while the telemetry force feedback stuff is in its infancy, I do believe it could get better as long as Moza sticks to it and takes some advice from the community. If they don't know what things should do, like, they just need to have a really good open communication with their user base to try to figure that stuff out. And then this will be really good eventually. Right now, it's super basic. It just feels like haptics. It kind of does like vibrations in a helicopter. The stick will shake. There's really nothing additive in telemetry as far as the current version that I have that really kind of puts this over the top for me. And so I'm just waiting. I'm waiting for the next update. Hopefully the direct input stuff is fixed. Hopefully the telemetry stuff gets a little bit better, but we'll see. Another issue I brought up with Moza is when you configure, you have to come in here and you have to configure. So I have a Windows install. I'm not using Steam. I have a Windows installation of DCS. I have to give it the path so that it detects where the installation is. So one of the other problems that I had, and hopefully this gets resolved soon, especially if they're launching soon, is the actual telemetry Lua that they use to communicate between DCS and the stick or the base. You set up DCS in here. I have a Windows install, so I have to give it the path of my install. If you have Steam, you just click this button here. And what happens is when you click start, it will deploy the Lua script that is used to communicate the telemetry back to the base. And what that looks like is this here. And this is fine, except for the fact that this overwrote my exports Lua. So in my exports Lua, I had simple radio, I had tac view, I think I had one other thing, maybe scratch pad or something, but it's all gone. And so that's going to be a really frustrating thing if they don't fix that. I've reported this problem 2 times already. Hopefully they get it fixed by the time it gets released. I gave them instructions on how the other simple radio and tac view install their script and run it from exports Lua without overwriting anything. I gave them information about how to do that. So hopefully they pay attention, because if everybody getting this device suddenly doesn't get simple radio working and no longer has tac view working, those probably the 2 big ones, right? And then there's sim shaker if you have an LFE or a butt kicker or one of those seats, the little shaker seats. I forget the name of it right now. If you have any of those won't work anymore. And so Moza really needs to make sure that's not something that happens on launch, because that would be really bad. So to kind of wrap everything up, I think that this base has a lot of potential. I think personally they rushed to market a little bit too soon. The software, I mean, it's not ready for review. I understand that they wanted me to do some feedback and some testing for them, and I've done that. But the software was like basically non-existent as far as it working when I first got it. The direct input didn't work. They fixed most of that. There's still a couple outstanding things, but it's getting there. The telemetry stuff was not working right. The update that I currently have right now, the telemetry stuff works a little bit better. The force feedback stuff works a little bit better. The direct input stuff, I mean, works a little bit better. But overall, like, I would have expected, hey, we've tested everything, it works, go try it out. But in reality, it just didn't work well. Hopefully by launch it works even better, but if I were somebody pre-ordering this and watching this video, I would be a little bit leery. Now, I've said this on my Discord. I made a big announcement about it. This is a new market for everyone. You know, the force feedback patent that was held up, nobody could use it because of Immersion Services or Immersion Corporation, whatever the company was. That fell off, and now everybody can do force feedback again, which is awesome. But it's going to take time to get good. It's not going to happen overnight. And if you are in this with a pre-order and you're watching this review and you're okay with kind of being the early access tester and you're okay with that whole early access model, this is early access hardware right here. The hardware itself, probably the least early access thing about it. The software is the problem. It's always the software, right? The software itself just has a ways to go, and hopefully it gets there quickly, and hopefully it's not in the state it's in, at least at launch. Hopefully a lot of the things I've pointed out to Moza are better, fixed, resolved, whatever, but we'll see. Thank you guys. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope this has given you guys some insight on what force feedback is, how the Moza base is working, what to expect, and things like that. If you like this video, hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.